I call the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow from Dr Jim Chalmers, the member for Rankin, who in a past life was the Chief of Staff to the immediate past Treasurer, and he succeeded Craig Emerson in the division of Rankin, and he acknowledged Dr Emerson's work to get these trade agreements through, and I too acknowledge his former member's work in this regard. I will admit also that my friend, the member for Rankin, was also the Executive Director of the Chifley Research Centre after leaving the Wayne Swan's office when he was pre-selected for Rankin. So there's a bit of history for you on Dr Chalmers. And the Chifley Research Centre is replicated in the National Party by the Page Research Centre. And the Page Research Centre, in conjunction with Senator Matthew Canavan, who's doing some fine work for Queensland as a Nationals senator, has produced this book in just recent times, John McEwen, His Story. And this relates to this piece of legislation because John McEwen was one of those, and it's historically important because he helped forge Australia's first relationship with Japan as far as trade is concerned. And if I could just read from this little 86-page book where John McEwen, Blackjack McEwen, went to Japan and helped to forge that first relationship with Japan. And he writes that the second great international negotiation I was involved with in my first years as Minister for Trade was the creation of a trade treaty with Japan. The Japanese economy was discussed extensively with the Trade Department between John Crawford, Alan Westerman and myself. And he writes that the circumstances that had made Britain and Australia such big customers for each other's products were being repeated with the Japanese. In addition, under the terms of the peace treaty following World War II, Australia was obliged to make some move in favour of trade with Japan. We decided to have a go at negotiating a trade treaty with Japan. The negotiations were complicated by our obligations under the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Now, it would not have been easy for Blackjack to help forge a relationship with Japan, particularly at this time, particularly when there was a lot of hostility, understandably so, from many Australians following the prisoner of war atrocities after the Second World War from 1939 to 1945, and just the fact that there was a lot of racial intolerance towards the Japanese for what had been perpetrated on Australian soldiers, on Australian nurses and on Australians in general. And Blackjack fought through that and realised the great potential that there was in having a trade treaty with Japan, and full credit to him. And in a similar way, the government has now forged another trade agreement with Japan, and this legislation, the Customs Amendment, Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement Implementation Bill, and Customs Tariff Amendment, Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement Implementation Bill, they're good pieces of legislation, Acting Deputy Speaker, and it is with pleasure that I do speak on these bills. The Economic Partnership Agreement established by the Prime Minister and the Minister for Trade, Andrew Robb, who is doing a fantastic job, absolutely fantastic job, early this year between Japan and Australia. It is a groundbreaking trade deal. It will drive economic growth and continue to build and to develop stronger trading relationships in Asia. Collectively with the Korea, China, Australia preferential, I prefer to call them preferential trade agreements because there's really, it's not totally free trade. If it were, rice and all these other things would be included, but it's a preferential trade agreement, and that's okay. The Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement form a powerful trifecta and positions Australia as a major partner to these three powerhouse economies, both in our region and globally. Indeed, the three trade agreements with South Korea, China and Japan, negotiated and concluded by the coalition government this year, are the most comprehensive trade deals ever achieved by Australia in Asia. Together, these three economies represent more than half of Australia's exports. Not only will Australians benefit from this landmark agreement with Japan, but in particular, regional Australia is a substantial benefactor, and I represent the seat of Riverina, and it will be a winner from these trade agreements, and in particular with the Japanese trade agreement. Australia and Japan concluded negotiations in April this year during the Prime Minister's historic and his highly successful visit to North Asia, and conclusively signed the agreement with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe during his visit to Australia on the 8th of July. Japan is an economic heavyweight. John McEwen recognised that. Tony Abbott recognises that. With a population of almost 127 million people now, a rapidly growing middle class, the third largest economy in the world, and our second largest export market, this partnership agreement with Japan represents enormous new opportunities in the expansion of current trading relationships for Australian producers, farmers, exporters. This is the most ambitious trade deal Japan has concluded with any nation whatsoever, and it's the first time Japan has signed a trade deal with another major agricultural country, and it is with Australia. A remarkable achievement, and particularly for Australian farmers, for Riverina farmers. Australia will benefit from major concessions across a wide range of areas, most notably in agriculture, as well as education, I have to say. A domain of traditional sensitivity for the Japanese is agriculture. This agreement will give Australian primary producers and exporters a significant competitive advantage by expanding current and access to new Japanese markets. It eliminates high tariffs on a wide range of Australian exports. It will see more than 97% of Australia's exports to Japan receive preferential access over our global competitors or enter duty-free when the agreement is fully implemented. This agreement positions Australia to capitalise on providing produce and services to an exploding population across Asia, which is expected to grow from 600 million to more than 3 billion people within the next 15 to 20 years. This economic partnership is an important step forward in our trade relationship with Japan, but also the establishment of trading agreements with South Korea and China are very, very significant advancements for diplomatic relationships in the wider North Asia region. Building stronger trading relationships with Japan will have profound effects on local job creation, greater market certainty, and it secures a positive future for Australia's economic growth. Australia's agriculture sector is world-class. We know that. We all know it. And we should be extolling the virtues of Australian agriculture at every possible step. We all should, on both sides of the House, because Australia's agriculture is the very best in the world. We produce more than what we consume at home. About 2/3 of our domestic agricultural production is exported overseas, as it needs to be. We need trade agreements. We need to help the balance of payments to reduce the barriers we face in major agri-food markets overseas. We do need these sorts of trade agreements. Our competitors in the United States of America, Canada, New Zealand and Brazil, for example, will not have the level of access that we have negotiated, that Andrew Robb has negotiated. This is a major win for our beef producers. Under this agreement, the frozen beef tariff will be reduced from 38.5% to 19.5% over 18 years, and fresh chilled beef will go to 23.5% over 15 years. This is an excellent outcome in our largest market for beef, with a trade valued at close to $1.5 billion last year. And I know how much the Agriculture Minister Barnaby Joyce has pushed our beef, pushed the live cattle, pushed the chilled box beef at every opportunity, and we're making great strides in that area. Meat and Livestock Australia forecasts, as a result of the Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement, that sales will jump by $5.5 billion over the next 20 years. Importantly, unlike our competitors, Australia will never have to face again Japan's 50% snapback tariff on beef. Similarly, we have also negotiated good export outcomes on dairy, wheat, malt barley, sugar, seafood, oilseeds, wine and a whole host of other agricultural products. Great news. A large number of these horticultural products are produced in the Murrumbidgee and Colliambly irrigation areas in the Riverina. And I've actually got some of the irrigators sitting in my office now, my parliamentary office here in Canberra, and they, I know, are very excited at the prospects that these sorts of trade arrangements are having for themselves, for local producers who they represent. In citrus, oranges, the 16% tariff faced by Australian exporters in our peak exporting season will be eliminated over 10 years under this economic partnership agreement. What great news! Absolutely fantastic news for Griffith, for Leeton, for Colliambly, for Hillston, for Narrandera, all of those great citrus-producing areas in the Riverina. With dairy, there are new market access opportunities in a heavily regulated industry with a complete network of World Trade Organisation quotas and domestic laws and quotas controlling all aspects of production and importation. Japan, however, is one of Australia's most important dairy markets, and Australia is Japan's largest supplier. Our exports were valued at $452 million last year, including $372 million of cheese, which faces tariffs of up to 29.8%. In particular, under the new partnership arrangement, dairy exporters will be able to access a new Australia-only duty-free cheese quota for natural cheese for processing, growing from 4,000 to 20,000 tonnes, and also cheese for shredding growing from 1,000 to 5,000 tonnes, and that's good news. Now, for a company trying to resurrect its original 1921 locally made and handcrafted cheese-producing facilities, this is just the kind of incentive, just the kind of opportunity that Coolum Cheese Company in my electorate would be looking for and could potentially benefit from. The Coolum Cheese Company is expected to open mid-next year and will see the creation of 12 to 15 full-time jobs in that town. That might not sound too many. Might not sound too many to the member for Kingsford Smith, although he has been to my area and he knows how those little small towns, 15 jobs is huge, and the multiplier effect from that is massive. Coolum Cheese will produce handcraft boutique cheeses under the guidance of Australia's most experienced cheesemaker, Barry Lillywhite, and will be an icon for the Riverina. And I'm sure the member for Kingsford Smith will enjoy when I bring him in some of that product mid-next year after the factory opens. This multifaceted I'll have to do it now, won't I? This multifaceted agri-tourism business will bring benefits locally to the Riverina, but also has the potential to expand and access international dairy markets, such as Japan, under this partnership arrangement. This landmark agreement has also improved the outcome for wine producers, and we all know that the best wine comes from the Riverina. I hear the chamber say. Wine exports to Japan were worth an estimated $42 million last year. Australian wine is currently at a disadvantage to Chilean wine. Under their partnership agreement with Japan, Chile secured tariff elimination over 12 years. It's a great result for Australian wine producers such as De Bortoli and Casella in the Riverina that the 15% tariff imposed on our wine will be eliminated over 7 years under this agreement. When I bring the member for Kingsford Smith some Coolum cheese, I'll have to bring him some Riverina wine as well. Our grains, including wheat, barley and sorghum, and their milling products. You can hear the chamber so excited about the prospects of this for Riverina farmers, Deputy Speaker. One of Australia's biggest agricultural exports to Japan, worth $770 million last year. Wheat on its own was worth $356 million, making Japan our fourth largest wheat market, and wheat is so important, it's so critical to the Riverina, and whilst we normally want rain and we normally want lots of it because there's money in mud, at the moment we just want dry and clear skies at the moment because our farmers are busy stripping. And for those Riverina farmers on their headers listening to this broadcast, they know how valuable and how good our wheat is in the Riverina and elsewhere, of course. Japan's grain trade is highly regulated, and while there are relatively low tariffs on grain, there are complex tendering arrangements and WTO quotas, duties and other markups outside this quota system. Wheat for food and feed face prohibitive tariffs when quotas have been met. Under the Economic Partnership Agreement, Australian grain growers will exclusively be able to export immediately wheat and barley for feed, duty-free outside of the existing quota system, as well as streamlined export arrangements for some Australian wheat varieties. This is another win for Riverina grain growers. With the rise of a bulging middle class across Asia, Australia growers will have a premium product for a premium market, which places little threat to local regional growers across Asia, so crucial to economic growth in developing nations. This partnership agreement with Japan presents increased opportunities for Australian producers who will inject high-quality products into new and existing markets. By establishing and building upon our existing strong relationship with Japan, this coalition government is achieving results for farmers. Industry and regional Australia can only get stronger and better because of what we're doing as a government. It's kicking goals. It's doing what we said we would do. It's getting our access into these rich Asian markets. I commend the Trade Minister, Minister Rob, for what he has done to forge these relationships, and I can only commend these bills to the House. They are very important, certainly important for Australian farmers, and when Australian farmers are strong, so too is our nation. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.